Well, welcome back to the only channel on YouTube that doesn't have an intro. Possibly the best channel on YouTube that doesn't have an intro. Today I'm talking about a continuation on the race and class templates for GURPS that I did, that I released last week. Along the same lines, I've been thinking about getting a game up and running, and doing a bit of world building. Now, world building is not something that I've always been in love with doing. It's a bit of work for me. I tend to rather focus my time on direct adventure prep, just prepping what is going to be directly in front of the characters in any given session. And I don't generally take the time to go off and prepare stuff for background purposes or stuff to be used very far in advance. But I've been thinking more about, in service of adventure prep, I've been thinking about, the things in the game setting. My adventure prep steps, if you've seen the other videos, I kind of rely on setting tropes a fair bit to get started for adventure design. And if I'm starting a fresh game in my own world and I don't have the world built enough that I don't have tropes established, well, then that is self-defeating. I can't make my own, I can't use my own adventure design steps to go off of tropes. So in service of that, we're going to try and I've been rethinking through world building and how to best streamline that process. Apparently my brain works better having a process to follow for these creative endeavors. I'm a bit weird like that, but maybe other people will feel the same way. So I was thinking, giving it some thought. I want to start a fantasy world. Nothing too crazy. We're going to start simple. And I remembered this great little page, the campaign planning forum in the back of the GURPS game. My cruddy old books. This will pull right out, so let's just pull that out. And this is, I was happy to see this, but then once I started going over it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is not at all what I want. This is kind of like an accounting form for your setting. This is not at all anything that helps the creative process, the process of coming up with drama and things for your setting. This is not it. This prompts you for things like campaign name, genre. Okay, fine, great. And then it goes into like society, government type, control rating. Yeah, tech level. Well, like all of these things I don't care about, nor have I given thought, and I certainly don't want to start thinking about my setting this way through this lens. It's kind of, this hurts my brain. This pulls me out of creative mode, this kind of stuff. We'll continue on. I'll just looking at this stuff like starting point value. That's useful to have. Disadvantage limit, PC races allowed, starting wealth, languages available, cultural familiarities, required advantages, disadvantages, skills, appropriate patrons, enemies, exotic supernatural traits. RPC mages allowed, RPC size allowed, unusual backgrounds, blah, 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 rules, variants. So this is a great little, kind of a nice check sheet, a checklist to go through after you've made your setting, maybe, and fill this out. But to be honest, I'm not sure if any of this stuff I'd ever refer back to. I just inherently know, what the tech level is. It's a fantasy game, so it's tech level 3. Anyways, this may be more for the completist, maybe after you've got your setting kind of written out and compiled, you've got some tropes and some background stuff, then you could fill this out for the mechanical portion. So anyways, I was a little sad to see that wasn't going to make my life any easier doing this world building. So I came up with my own method, which I will maybe spend a few videos in the future going over in detail, because this is still very much a work in process. I've been working on it for, I guess, a day or two. So just thinking about how my brain would best work when it comes to creating a world, but specifically to fulfill the requirements that I need for my adventure design, which is I require tropes, world tropes, like for instance, in Rifts, you know, off the top of my head, a couple tropes would be augmented humanity, bionics, crazy conversion, juicer conversion, stuff like that. The whole trope that the golden age was lost, and people are out adventuring in the wilderness and covering ruins and lost tech, interesting things like that. So I started a little checklist here of how to start a world building endeavor here with GURPS, and I've started with first list your genre just to get that down, fantasy for me. And then next, theme/mood that you want to go for. Now for me, this is usually, doesn't stray much, no matter what genre I'm in. I kind of like realistic, leaning towards realistic and semi-dark. Not horror by any means, but there's usually horrific monsters to be faced. And then I need tropes for that world. And I think any good game, when I think back to my favorite games that I enjoy playing, there's not many. Admittedly, I've not come across many that are very good at this, but I think the best games have setting tropes, so they have a fairly well fleshed out, interesting setting, world setting. Let's go with Earth Dawn. That's probably my favorite example of this. Great setting. Okay, they've got tropes built into the setting, and the tropes generate default adventuring goals. Right out of the gate, the setting, a major setting trope is that there exists countless buried, forgotten cares out in the wilderness, where people sealed themselves up with all their wealth, and they trapped the crap out of the things to keep the horrors at bay during the scourge. Basically, magical bunkers. That's a trope, but it also gives you a default adventure goal. Like every PC that you ever create in that world, they have the default goal. If they can't, if your GM can't think up anything different or better or whatever, you can always just go off into the wilderness in search of treasure, dungeon delving. So that's a great example, and something I'd like to build in always to my world. And it's best if the game itself, the game mechanics, support the tropes in your setting. A lot of games aren't great at that. Most games try, I guess, to do that a bit, but in GURPS we've got so much flexibility. I've got to give that some thought and consciously build that in. And then the next thing, so we've got tropes. So come up with some tropes off the top of your head, get started, and then default goals. They will kind of come out of the tropes, and race/class templates to give people an idea, give players an idea of what kind of adventurers, what kind of adventure will they be playing. The character classes are a direct indication of what the players can and will be doing. So for instance, fighter, mage, barbarian, thief. You know, they'll be doing thieving. They'll be doing fighting, they'll be doing magic casting. Those are things that you can do in this setting. And these don't have to be done in order, I'm finding. So again, work in progress. I'm going to write this up officially. I'll probably post it for download if anybody else is interested in this nonsense. But right now I'm just kind of having fun with it, brainstorming, getting my process down. These can be done in any order, and they're kind of a circular dependency, I find here too. They're informing each other. For instance, I wanted a trope where I'm thinking the clerics, there's only light and darkness. I'm going to keep it simple, black and white, okay? The struggle is the humans and all the good races against the dark races. The good races, I'm thinking, they're birthed in a town of light. And the dark races, the hordes like the orcs and ogres, goblins, whatever. I'm thinking more along the lines of Tolkien-ish. They're kind of born out of breeding pits and things like that. And they really are horrific and evil and monsters to be vanquished. So that's kind of my trope. And that sort of informs how I write up the template for the cleric. In many cases, well, in this case, I had the templates I wrote, like I think it was 10 years ago. I just made up these templates because I thought these skills would be cool for a cleric or whatever. So, I just started. That was my starting point. But now it's time to kind of reinforce those abilities and skills that we gave to the templates. Reinforce them into the tropes of the setting and the default goals. So, it's hard to explain. I'm not sure where I'm going with this either. But I'll try to keep this brief. What are we at, 11 minutes already? So we just go around and around trying to flesh out each category, the tropes, the default goals, and the race templates by circularly informing each other. After I kind of thought up a couple tropes, very vague ones, then I started doing default goals. And using the templates, the skills and abilities of each class, I specifically tried to come up with a default adventure goal for each class, so that we don't have anything like any characters being made that never really get the spotlight, don't really have a use, or without the GM really getting creative and going out of his way to work that character into the story or the adventure. I want it to come easier, I guess. It just needs to be part of the setting. So for instance, the barbarian, he's kind of built for combat and wilderness. So I just wrote down, for the barbarian, we need a default goal that somehow includes the need for exploration and clearing wilderness lairs. That's what I was thinking. So right away, boom, we've got a need. We have a character who's good at wilderness, navigation and exploration, and he's good at combat. So there we go. We have a need to fill. There's a trope. The world is going to be sparsely populated with self-sufficient towns scattered across the continent. They are not necessarily trading with other towns really much. They'll have roads, I'm sure. I'll get to that later. I'm not sure yet. But they're mostly isolationists. And there are barbarians roaming and eking a living out in the wilderness. And they are special in that they are able to, live that way. So that is the niche of the barbarian. We're going to make that into our setting. And as far as the wilderness clearing wilderness lairs, wherever we find the evil dark races, a lair of them, they're not just like bad dudes. I think they are supernaturally evil, perhaps. So wherever their lair is set up, wherever there's a breeding pit, it starts infecting and twisting the landscape around them, I'm thinking. So this is going to be a real driving factor for the characters to be out adventuring, battling back, perhaps, the corruption. And that's where the barbarian will excel. He'll, like a party of barbarians would excel at just cruising around the wilderness, living off the land. They wouldn't even need necessarily to pack supplies because their survival skills are so good, and they'd be just stomping out evil lairs. Continuing on, the cleric is kind of built for exterminating undead, and I put similarly sanctifying or clearing evil lairs. Continuing on, let's go down to another. Like, some of them are obvious. The fighter, well, he's there for combat. He's just a supporting character, really. If you look at it through the lens of setting tropes, the drama that goes on around the tropes, there will always be combat, and the fighter is the man for that. So we don't necessarily... We could come up with something interesting, but I have not yet. A bit more complicated is to work, usually I find, anyways, working the bard into the setting. What is the point of a bard? You know, in vanilla D&D, back in the days of AD&D, they were kind of, it seemed like they were a total afterthought. There's nothing in the setting that made them useful. Like, what were they meant for? I'm sure lots of people have an answer for that, and they worked it in. But I want to have my setting require bards. You don't have to have one in your party, but there is a place for them. Earth Dawn is another example that did really well. The whole civilization of name givers are fairly interested and obsessed with recovering lost history, lost cares, lost treasure, lost heroes and legends. And the bards, the troubadours are called there, are the main go-to person for that. If you find lost treasure, a magic item, it is the bard who is usually the best at identifying the history of that weapon. And in that game, of course, you can't use the magic item or whatever until you've deciphered its history, who it belonged to, stuff like that. Key knowledges about its history, which is very cool. They built the setting to support the class. The class belongs. That's what we're going to do here. So my bard, I've started with, he's obviously, his default goals, his abilities are social in nature. And so GURPS has a reputation advantage. And I want to have the characters, I want to have a track, characters tracking their group's reputation as they do greater exploits and things. I want to track the reputation, and I want the bard to be the one doing the social fronting of the group in towns and such, or in any social situation, trying to always cultivate that reputation. So we're going to put that, make that a mechanical thing. GURPS has already done it for us, so no house ruling or anything much required there. I'd like to take it a step further for the bard, and work in a deep setting trope, and it will be, I think, probably similar to how Earth Dawn did it, in requiring the history skill of the bard for tracking down or learning about ancient ruins and magic items, things like that. So that will be the bard's forte. It will be between him and probably the mage, because the mage has hidden lore, but that is going to be, in my world, much more specific to lost magic, ancient magics, runes, things like that. So in my mind, probably out of the classes here that I have, probably the dramatic drivers of the story would be the bard and the mage, since they're the ones who are sort of going to be the ones who are getting the rumors, or they've heard of this lost ruin, which was the last known place, last known sighting of, the Holy Avenger Sword of Light. And so they'll be the ones kind of driving that narrative. But I don't know. You see what I'm getting at here? I think I'm perhaps repeating myself now. So we're just trying to support the character classes, reinforce their usefulness in the setting itself with the tropes, and in turn that's creating default goals for the characters to chase down. Here's just kind of my brain dumps, my worksheet. This will turn into I'll make a PDF out of this at some time, I'm sure. Here I'm just listing the tropes. I'm just starting to lay into those now, because these are becoming more obvious. I have to write a trope to fulfill these default goals that I've listed for each class. Now has to be manifested in the setting in some way. So yeah, that's the work in progress. That's where we're at so far. Hopefully that'll be of use to somebody somewhere someday as well, once I kind of walk through this. But stay tuned for more details on this as I progress, and roll on.